Welcome to Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio News Talk 1180 for the best in Saturday Talk Radio at 1 o'clock and on 1230 KGEO at 10 o'clock Saturday. And Clay for the best in Wednesday Talk Radio on 1410 KERI at 1 o'clock on Wednesday. Your host is Clay Koerner. I'm Marty Pay. And behind the big board is the producer, Greg Held. Hey, Clay, that was a fun show last week with State Senator Jean Fuller.
She's always fun.
I like Jean. She's fantastic. We're lucky to have her and Shannon in Sacramento in that den of inequity.
Well, you called it a den of inequity, but there's some nice people up there.
There are some nice people up there, but that's a subject for another show. Our second guest last week, Jake Suski from Stop Special Interest Money Now, was, I thought, very informative, and that's an initiative that we got to get passed in November.
You know that's right.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen, but we're going to push it as much as we can. I am really, really excited about today's show. Our guest in the second half is Tony Katz from the All Patriots Media Network. But joining us by phone, and I love his bio, is New York Times best-selling author of Tales from the Left Coast and Hollywood Nation, author of a very popular weekly column, The Left Coast Report, James Hirsen. James, welcome to Taking Care of Business.
Hey, great to be with you. How are you?
Good. I've become one of your newest, biggest fans. I've read some of your articles, and I'm looking forward to getting your last book on Hollywood.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that very much. It's hidden in the back of the bookstore.
Especially in L.A., right?
Yes.
that kind of leads. That's a good segue to my first question. How the heck do you get away with some of this in L.A.? I mean, I spent most of my life in North Hollywood and Sherman Oaks, and I know Hollywood very well. So I'm surprised that you can get away with this and still be a part of Hollywood. Well,
there's a very healthy underground in Hollywood, and they whisper to me, and we meet secretly, and I'm their confessor. But mainstream Hollywood, if I want to go to social gatherings, I have to crash them because I won't be invited.
For some strange reason. And I notice in your bio you have taught at Biola.
I still do, as a matter of fact. I consider it just an honor to be associated with such an amazing institution, over 100 years old, and unlike other educational institutions, they started dedicated to faith.
Yes.
And to the Christian faith, and they stayed that way, unlike, say, for example, Harvard, who became associated with Satan.
Yes.
Instead.
Well put. Well put. I can remember I used to be a talk show host, a guest show host in L.A. About 22 years ago, and I had the opportunity to speak at Biola a couple of years ago, and it's just a neat environment. I really love that place. It's a great school.
No, it really is, and people there now, I think it must be maybe 20,000 students or something, and they're from all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the kindest campus community I have ever seen, so supportive with each other, the students. It's really inspiring the way they bear the fruit of their faith as they go to school. It really helps young people in the learning experience. And it's interesting because I teach in the radio, TV, and film school. Even though I'm a lawyer, I teach law.
I'm sorry to hear that you're
a
lawyer.
I apologize for that. Recovering.
Recovering attorney.
But the students, we have a pretty healthy alumni who have infiltrated, if you will, both in the world of journalism and the world of entertainment, and have made great strides. And it's really wonderful to have at least a healthy insurrection going on in this generally evil place.
Well put. Well, speaking of it being an evil place, boy, you're doing all the segues for me, James. I appreciate that.
Oh, good.
What attracted me to you, first of all, was an article you did in Newsmax on same-sex marriage playing well in Hollywood. Mm-hmm. Fascinating subject to me because, on one hand, looking at the polls, and I'd like your comment on this, it looks like he's losing people because of the stance he took, yet it's igniting his far-left base, which is the Hollywood crowd. Is that
that's very well stated. As a matter of fact, it's been a little over a week since he had his so-called epiphany, which really was nothing. It was what everybody knew his belief was already, in the sense of his actions in refusing to defend the Defense of Marriage Act, in overturning Don't Ask, Don't Tell, I mean, it was almost like he was winking. Well, now he's come out and said that. But during the week, there were 3 or 4 polls that showed that it's a net minus right now in the polls for Obama. And my theory on this is, because I'm originally from Chicago and I understand David Axelrod, Obama's chief strategist's Machiavellian thinking, and I believe they think if they have enough money, the polls don't matter, because they'll be able to use their money to trash the opposition, Mitt Romney, and to change beliefs and their influence. When you talk about the far left base, that includes both Hollywood and the mainstream media. That's a very powerful coalition to have on your side, which they do now, all enthused with energy. So, for example, late yesterday, the rapper mogul, very influential in the African-American community, Jay-Z, announced he also has had an epiphany. He also has evolved in his thinking, and he also is for same-sex marriage, which will have an effect, which is exactly what the Obama campaign wants, is to have the African-American community, which overwhelmingly is against the president on this issue, change their view. I think they're wrong, though, personally, because what they're not paying attention to is what statisticians call a confounding variable, and that is, in California, for example, when Tom Bradley, the former mayor of Los Angeles, ran for governor, he was way ahead in the polls, and then he lost. So it gave birth to this term, the Bradley effect,
right,
where the polls are distorted by individual responding to pollsters in fear and distorting their answers. And I think that's what's happening with this issue, especially with some of the reactions out there of people. So I do think that the White House has a bigger net minus even than one of the polls shows. New York Times CBS poll showed 26% of voters were less likely to support Obama. In a close election, that's huge. I think it's even bigger. I think unless the Romney campaign, has self-inflicted wounds or something comes out of left field, I think we'll look back on this as the reason, a very significant factor, maybe the factor, why Obama gets defeated in November.
Ooh, I can see the look on Clay's face. Let me reintroduce you, and then Clay's got a question for you.
Sure.
Our guest by phone is James Hirsen from the Left Coast Report.
James, I don't know if it's a question or more of a comment, but when I was in college and in the fraternity, I loved my fraternity brothers. I loved several of those guys, and I still love them today. And I lived with a couple, but it wasn't a sexual thing. And I think people misinterpret a strong, loving friendship as a sexual relationship that they develop. Any truth to that?
Before he comments, I'm glad to hear you say that, since I'm sitting across a desk from you and there's only a mic separating us here.
Well, you're not a fraternity brother, so don't worry.
Okay, good. Okay.
Well, I don't want to get into debating what constitutes gayness or homosexual behavior or anything like that. I mean, I think that's a very, and then you get into whether it's nurture or nature and all this stuff. But I do think that in every culture, there is a natural kind of reaction to same sexes getting intimate with each other, and it can't really be totally suppressed. I mean, you hear it on the street, you hear it in pejoratives, and the idea, it's almost tragic to me. Here in California, we have a situation where they're changing the school curriculum in such an extreme manner that parents are pulling their kids out of public schools, going into homeschooling, because they don't want children indoctrinated with sexual content about sexual preference, because we want to protect the innocence of children. And that's a major part of, I believe, what people are concerned about with the definition of a tradition that is thousands of years old, that has always been part of human culture, which is marriage. And so it has to do with children to a great extent, although that's not discussed often. And the idea of two people being committed and loving each other in a committed way. There's all kinds of combinations of human beings where love manifests in all kinds of ways. And should people be discriminated against because they have a particular way of loving some other person? Of course not. And that's anti-American. But should we change the definition of what religious people consider sacred and what many scholars consider an essential part of the fundamental fabric of civilization? That's a legitimate debate to have, and people who have it should not be labeled as hating, homophobic, etc.
And I totally agree with you. When we come back from the break, I want to talk to you about how this has helped or hurt Obama. We'll be back in a moment on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio, News Talk 1180.